Maharaj, close these. Close these. No?
Only a little bit. Because this one I've closed. Now it's getting colder, the temperatures are going to drop.
That is okay.
Yeah, no problem. Hare Krishna. Krishna Krishna. You know her Mahalakshmi Keating. I remember Kenneth Keating was a very good man. Like UN ambassador, good guy. Happy birthday. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna.
I have some popcorn in bags. If I can bring that over if you want. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. And you get rid of that other stuff.
Yeah, I go full of that.
Yeah.
So you clean it,
Doesn't it pop?
Yeah. Yeah, I'll bring it over. Yeah. Get rid of that. Yeah.
Shri Jagannath Baladev Subhadra Sudarshan Chakra ki jai. Jai Shri Giriraj Govardhana ki jai. Jai Shri Nitai Gauranga ki jai. Jai Shri Nishinga Bhagavan ki jai. Jai Shri Rupa Nuga Guru Varga ki jai. Jai Shri Gauranga Mahaprabhu ki jai. Jai Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda ki jai. Samagata Gaur Bhakta Vrinda ki jai. Nitai Gaur Premanandi. Vandeham Shri Guru Shijataha Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vainata Sadvaitam Savadhutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Lalita Shri Vishakhanvitamscha Om Jnanatimirandasya Jnananjanashalakaya Chakshurunvilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namah Mukam Kuroti Vacha Alam Bangam Langayate Girim Yat Kripa Tamaham Bande Shri Gurun Dinataranam Vancha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavibhyo Namo Namaha Namo Mahavadanyaya Krishna Prema Pradayate Krishnaya Krishna Chaitanya Namne Gaurya Kite Namaha He Krishna Karuna Sindho Dinabandho Jagatapate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vrindai Tulsi Debai Priyai Keshavasya Cha Krishna Bhakti Prade Devi Satyavachai Namo Namaha Panchatattvatmakam Krishnam Bhakta Rupa Swarupakam Bhaktavataram Bhaktakyam Namami Bhakta Shaktikam Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare First of all, I'm offering my unlimited Dandavat Pranams, my Shraddha Pushpanjali at the lotus feet of my most beloved worshipable Gurudev Nitya Leela Pravishna. Om Vishnupad Paramahansa Asto Tarasata Sri Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Maharaj Srila Prabhupada. And then I'm offering my same unlimited Dandavat Pranams, my Shraddha Pushpanjali at the lotus feet of my most worshipable beloved Siksha Gurudevs Nitya Leela Pravishna. Om Vishnupad Paramahansa Asto Tarasata Sri Srila Bhakti Rakshak Sridhar Goswami Maharaj and Nitya Leela Pravishta Om Vishnupad Paramahansa Asto Tarasata Sri Srila Bhakti Vedanta Narayan Goswami Maharaj. And my Dandavat Pranams to the lotus feet of all my Sri Sri Rupanuga Gaudiya Guru Varga, and my Dandavat Pranams to all the Vaishnavas and all the Vaishnavas. Up to this point, we have covered the first and second verses of Sri Upadeshamrita with all four commentaries. Commentaries of Srila Prabhupada and Srila Radharaman Das Goswami, Srila Sachidananda Bhaktivinoda Thakur, and Srila Bhaktivedanta, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. And there is one more book that I mentioned, which is a compilation of 12 lectures of Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur. Not lectures, but articles that he wrote. He personally wrote them. That book was published and printed in ISKCON quite a few years ago. he's writing an article on each one of the 6 items that are to be avoided and 6 items that are to be cultivated. From the 2nd and the 3rd shloka of Upadeshamrita. And guess what? Our book publishing team actually included that, the full book, in their own. I guess they looked at the original Bengali, even though it's been translated into English. Actually, Madhukar Prabhu was telling me this when the book from Madhuri Kadambini first came out, like a couple of years ago it came out, printed. And he said, yes, we actually included Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur's full essays. So, came to my attention by our Tulsi Dasi that it makes up a very large portion of the book. Actually, it makes up more than half of the book. So what I did was, of course, I have the hard copy as well. I mean, the printed copy, I have that book. But a little easier for me to read because of the lighting. I downloaded it. So I have it here on this iPad. And we will now find it. Okay, so I'll have to study this on my own because I thought that it was, she showed me in the book how much it comprises, but I can't find it here in the index, how it's listed. And I've looked for the index before. Maybe the 3rd shower. Anyway, I have the book in my room.
Want me to bring it, Mars?
Yeah, I don't know if you'll be able to find it where I put it. You know what it looks like?
Yeah.
It's not Madhuri Kadambini.
Yeah, it's Upadi Sambrita, the new one.
No, it's not Upadesha.
Oh, the back.
That's right. That's right. It's the Upadeshamrita, the new one.
Yeah, the new one.
Yes. I made a mistake. See, to err is human. And I did not remember. I thought it was the Madhuri Kadambini she was talking about. Because Madhukar mentioned that to me. Anyway. Alright, so I did download that one as well. So let's... Yeah, okay. Here it is. Now go to the index. 6 essays. Here it is. Thank you. You saved the day. Okay, so it's actually from page 73 up to 205.
Wow.
Yeah, it actually makes up more than the other part, the actual book. Okay, so now you're going to begin reading that from page 73. Find the page. Okay, sorry for the wait. So this first section is titled Atyahara, overeating or overcollecting. So now we will begin our discussion for the coming days, directly from Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur, of the second shloka of Sri Upadesha Amrita, where it's mentioning the 6 things that are unfavorable. Second shloka. And once we finish that, then we will begin the third shloka in the same sequence that we were doing before. First reading Srila Prabhupada's purport, then the other 3, and then we'll come back to this book. So that will be a very complete analysis. So again, the verse. It is Sri Upadeshamrita. Srila Rupa Goswami has written in the second verse, Atyahara prayasascha, everyone can say,
Atyahara prayasascha
prajalpo niyamagraha
prajalpo niyamagraha
janasangascha lolyam cha
janasangascha loyam cha
shadbir bhaktir vinashyati
shadbir bhaktir vinashyati.
Bhakti is destroyed by the following 6 kinds of faults. 1. Eating too much or collecting more than necessary. 2. Endeavoring for that which is opposed to bhakti. 3. Engaging in useless mundane talk. 4. Failing to adopt essential regulations or being fanatically attached to regulations. 5. Associating with persons who are opposed to bhakti. And 6, possessing a greed or restlessness of mind to adopt worthless opinions. Now Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur begins his explanation. It's a bit more volume. Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol. Okay. He is saying, it is highly necessary, not too much, it is highly necessary to consider the deep meaning of this verse. It's highly necessary. If anybody says that it's not very necessary, I'll have a problem with that. So, for those who desire to engage themselves in the practice of supremely pure bhakti, it is essential to strictly follow this verse's instructions. Now I ask the question, is it possible to attain supremely pure bhakti without following the instructions of this verse?
Absolutely not.
If we find somebody that is declaring that they are on a very high level of realization, but they do not live and act according to this verse, do we believe them? No. We cannot accept. Because pure bhakti is not something that can be imitated. It is not something that can be forcefully attained by your own, mental faculties. No. It is done by following the instructions as given by Srila Rupa Goswami, which means Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Because what Srila Rupa Goswami is giving is what Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has given. We have to understand that this Upadeshamrita has emanated directly from Sri Sachinandana Gaurahari. At the very end of all of his pastimes, he spoke this. And Rupa Goswami was there, he wrote it down, and then he composed these verses to give these instructions. So that's why it's called the sacred garland that all the Gaudiya Vaishnavas must wear and cherish as their very pran, as their very life, this Upadeshamrita. They must wear this always. So, for devotees who are lax in following these instructions, Hari Bhakti is rarely attained. It is only for sincere practitioners whose hearts are eager to attain Bhagavad Bhakti that we are explaining the purport of this verse, in which the following 6 impediments on the path of Bhakti are mentioned: Atyahara, Prayash, Prajalpa, Niyamagraha, Janasanga, and Lolya. We will sequentially describe each of the above-mentioned impediments. In the following short essay, we will describe the meaning of Ati Ahara. The word, this is the title of this subsection. The word Ati Ahara does not mean only eating too much. The word Ati Ahara, overeating in parentheses, it does not mean only eating too much. The first verse of Sri Upadeshamrita mentions, what's the first verse of Sri Upadeshamrita? Vacho vegam manasa krodha vegam jiva vegam udurapashva vegam etan vegan yo vishaheta dhira sarvam apimam pritivim sashishyat. Translation: he who can tolerate the urge to speak, the urge of the mind, the urge of anger, the urge of the tongue, the urge of the belly, and the urge of the genitals, and does not deviate, that is, he remains steady, he is a sober person, and he can instruct the entire world. Here, the urge of the tongue, jiva vega, indicates the desire to taste palatable foods, and the urge of the belly, udara vega, indicates the desire to overeat. If we also understand the word atyahara to mean the desire to overeat, then because Sri Upadeshamrita is presented as a concise compilation of the essence of the principles of bhakti, then such a definition would possess the fault of repetition. Understand this point? Rupa Goswami has given the condensed, very essential main points in Upadeshamrita. But if the very first verse is talking about the urge of the belly and the tongue, that means that overeating is there. So if in the very next verse, Rupa Goswami is mentioning as the very first word in the verse, atyahara, overeating, and if it was pertaining only to overeating, well, that means that Rupa Goswami would be doing redundancy. He would be unnecessarily repeating. Okay? So if anybody's thinking that it means only overeating, then that's wrong. So, in this situation, it is incumbent on the readers to correctly investigate any additional purports of the word atyahara that the exceedingly profound personality Srila Rupa Goswami has given. There is no doubt that the primary meaning of the word ahara is food, but the word food also implies the enjoyment of the 5 senses. So, for example, form is food for the eyes. Right? Sound is food for the ears. Fragrance is food for the nose. Taste is food for the tongue. And the tactile sensations of smoothness, roughness, coolness, warmth, and other sensations are food for the skin. Embodied souls will invariably enjoy these sense objects. Without doing so, it is impossible for them to sustain their lives. If the conditioned living entities were to completely abandon sense enjoyment, they would surely leave their body. Therefore, total renunciation of sense objects is simply an imaginary concept. In reality, it is not possible. What then are we to do in such a situation? It is our duty to maintain our lives in a way, this is the subsection title, next subsection. It is our duty to maintain our lives in a way that is favorable for bhakti. So everybody has to maintain their life, is it not? I mean, how can you block your senses? When we wake up in the morning, immediately all of our senses become activated, right? Sight, sound, taste, whatever. So, Sri Krishna has instructed Arjuna as follows. This is in the third chapter, verse 5 and 6. Nahi kaschit kshanamapi jatu tishtati akarma krit karyate hyavasha karma sarva prakati jair gunai karmendriyani samyamya ya aste manasa smaran indriyartan vimudhatma mityachara sauchyate. So these two verses, verse 5 and 6, Krishna is telling, no one can remain inactive, not even for a moment. Everyone is impelled to act under the influence of such qualities as attachment and hate, which are born of one's nature. A deluded person who forcibly restrains his working senses while internally meditating on sense objects is to be known as a hypocrite. Mithya achara, false actor. No person can at any time exist without performing some action. In other words, although a person with an impure consciousness may renounce the pious action, karma, which is prescribed in Shastra, so this person, he is impure. His consciousness is impure. So he may renounce these prescribed duties of karma in the Shastra, but he is induced to continue performing activities related to practical life due to his being subject to the modes of material nature. So in other words, he's still going to be acting, but he's just not acting according to the Shastras. Therefore, he is not to renounce those actions that Shastra prescribes as a means to purify the consciousness. How will a person whose consciousness has not been purified benefit by externally or forcefully controlling his working senses, such as his arms, legs, and speech? He will continue to meditate on the objects of his active senses and thus be known as a foolish hypocrite. No one can live for a moment without performing action. Therefore, it is essential to perform action that is beneficial. Right? A very logical conclusion. You have to do actions, but you have to also make sure that all the actions that you're performing are beneficial for you. So if that action is performed with indifference to Bhagavad Bhakti, however, it will be the cause of material bondage. It has to not be with indifference towards Bhagavad Bhakti. So for this reason, the action required to sustain one's life should be favorable for Bhagavad Bhakti. Only then is it Bhakti Yoga. So suppose that somebody's involved in a occupation they've adapted, which is quite contrary to the rules and regulations of Bhakti Yoga. Will that help his bhakti? Suppose that it's even a sinful activity. Is that going to be favorable and beneficial for the person's bhakti? No, of course not. Because we cannot imagine, we cannot stretch our imagination to try to make our own list of things that are favorable and unfavorable. It's already made. We have to follow what the acharyas have told. It's very simple. But the problem is, there's two kinds of persons, simple and crooked. Remember how Prabhupada used that term? He says, bhakti is simple for the simple-hearted. And the simple-heartedness is the nature of a Vaishnava. Mahaprabhu told this. Saralata is the word in Sanskrit. Means very simple and straightforward. Not hiding, no hypocrisy, not inwardly doing something that you're professing not to do outwardly, like this. Outward and inward are the same. It's called saralata. And Mahaprabhu said this is how you can recognize a Vaishnava. That's one of the main qualities of a Vaishnava. So Prabhupada told, in his own unique way, that the practice of Krishna consciousness, it is simple for the simple-hearted, but it is very difficult for the crooked. So we know what crookedness is. The conditioned souls are continuously swimming in an ocean of hypocrisy and, what is it called?
Duplicity.
Duplicity, yes. The verse of Sri Raghunath Das Goswami in the Manasiksha, he's describing there that this donkey of hypocrisy and cheating and hypocrisy, deceitful, that not straightforward, deceitfulness. There's many different types. It's analyzed in the purport of that verse by Bhaktivinoda Thakur, actually. How do three different types of sadhakas manifest this deceitfulness and hypocrisy? Three different types of sadhaks, who are in three different kind of stations of life. How do they manifest? How do these qualities become apparent in them? But he calls it the urine of the donkey of deceitfulness. That the conditioned soul is bathing in the urine of a donkey. I mean, we can't even imagine getting a bucket of donkey urine and taking bath. But that's the nature of the mind, that in fact, they think that by taking bath they're becoming purified. It's the nature of the mind. So much cheating. This is how Sahajism and Prakriti Sahajism and all these different things manifest in this world. It's because the conditioned souls are full of deceitfulness and hypocrisy. And because they're not following Upadeshamrita and they're not under the guidance of pure Vaishnavas, or they may have the association of the pure Vaishnavas, but they don't apply it. So therefore, the deceitfulness and hypocrisy take many different forms and many different permutations of so-called philosophies. So he said that for this reason, that no one can live for a moment without performing action, and therefore it is essential to perform action that is beneficial. If that action is performed with indifference to Bhagavad Bhakti, however, it will be the cause of material bondage. For this reason, the action required to sustain one's life should be favorable for Bhagavad Bhakti. Only then is it Bhakti Yoga. Now, the next subsection is titled The Procedure for Accepting Sense Objects. Sri Krishna further mentions in the Bhagavad Gita, in the 6th chapter. What's the 6th chapter? Ashtanga Yoga. Yes. So, in the verses 16 and 17, Krishna is telling that this yoga cannot be perfected by those who eat excessively, eat too little, sleep excessively, or sleep too little. The verse reads as follows. Nati yashnatas tu yogosti, nachaikantam anashnata, nachati swapna shilasya, jagrato naiva charjuna, yuktahara viharasya, yukta chestasya karmasu, yukta swapnava bodhasya, yogo bhavati dukkhaha. Yogo bhavati dukkhaha. So Krishna is saying in these two verses, this yoga that he's speaking of to Arjuna, actually Ashtanga Yoga, it cannot be perfected by those who eat excessively, eat too little, sleep excessively, or sleep too little. Rather, this yoga which destroys suffering is perfected by those who regulate their eating and enjoyment, as well as their sleep and wakefulness. Then, in the 5th chapter, now he quotes 2 more verses from the 5th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, verses 8 and 9. Naiva kinchit karomiti yukto manyeta tattvavit, pashyan shrinvan sprishan jigran ashnan gachan svapan shvasan, pralapan vishrijan grinnan unmisham nimisham napi, Indriyan indriyarteshu vartanta iti dharaya. I remember seeing this verse the first time when we had, the full Sanskrit and the synonyms. And just the way that Krishna, it's a long list actually. You could notice that he's saying Pashyan, Shrinvan, Sprishan, Jigran, Ashnan, Gachan, Swapan. So what is that a list of? It's a list. Here's the list. A karma yogi sees, hears, touches, smells, eats, walks, sleeps, breathes, talks, renounces, accepts and opens and shuts his eyes. But because his knowledge of the absolute truth, his tattva gyan, he believes, quote, I am not doing anything. It is only this body in which I am situated that is doing everything. Being bound by ignorance, I only assess and reflect on these actions. After self-realization is attained, then the mentality of being the doer and the enjoyer is removed. So Bhaktivinoda Thakur is saying, those who eat too much or too little, those who sleep too much or too little, they do not attain perfection in yoga. Whereas a person who eats, enjoys, and sleeps moderately, according to his needs, does. The sadhaka should reflect in this way. All my senses are wandering after the objects of the senses, but I am a pure soul, and therefore beyond such things. One should accept the objects of the senses with such discrimination. So tell me, what did Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur accomplish in this discussion by quoting these verses from Bhagavad Gita?
The soul is aloof from all these actions, reactions of the material senses with their object.
Mm-hmm. Right. he's still engaging his senses. This is the thing. He hasn't stopped the engagement of his senses, but the consciousness has changed. If an ordinary, gross, materialistic karmi, conditioned soul, who doesn't have any tattva jnana, they don't even know that they're not their body, is involved in sense enjoyment, they fully are under the illusion of Maya that I'm enjoying, I'm enjoying and I'm the doer. I'm doing this. I'm enjoying this. But because that is actually not really true, it's actually not really true that they are the doer and that they're enjoying. The actual fact is that it's only the senses that are engaged with the sense objects, and the conditioned soul is actually in a sleeping condition, aloof from them. So when the transcendental knowledge begins to awaken in the heart, he's talking about in the beginning stages, a person who's engaged even in karma yoga. They have to reflect philosophically. They have to understand truth, tattva jnana. And by acting according to tattva jnana and occupying their mind and their senses in this way of contemplating that in actuality, when I'm eating, I'm not really eating. When I'm engaging my senses, I'm shutting my eyes, I'm opening my eyes, I'm breathing, I'm talking, I'm walking, I'm sleeping, smelling. When a person is in knowledge of the absolute truth, has tattva jnana, then he believes, I'm not doing anything. It is only this body in which I am situated that is doing everything. And being bound by ignorance, I only assess and I reflect on these actions. So after self-realization is attained, then the mentality of being the doer and the enjoyer is removed. Very good news for us. Yeah.
So if you're eating too much or eating too little, sleeping too much or sleeping too little, then you're thinking you're the doer.
Yeah. Well, that's because of illusion, that someone is excessively doing those activities. So that's why atiyahara is the topic of this. Because atiyahara means overindulgence of the senses in their sense objects. But you cannot make ahar, the accepting, actually also means accepting, not only eating, but ahar, to accept certain things excessively. That's why there is a regulated system given to the pure practitioners of Bhakti Yoga path, according to Krishna's instructions in Bhagavad Gita, which is the basis of all the other Vedic knowledge, Bhagavad Gita. So Krishna is teaching the conditioned souls how you can gain control of your senses and your mind, and you can engage them properly. And through this proper engagement, gradually, your internal knowledge, transcendental knowledge, will awaken. And when that becomes awakened, then your vision is not the same as it used to be. Your vision of yourself, your vision of others, your vision of the whole world changes so much. So, now, I'll just read this last couple of sentences. Those who eat too much or eat too little, and those who sleep too much or too little, they do not attain perfection in yoga. Whereas a person who eats, enjoys, and sleeps moderately, according to his needs, he does. The sadhak should reflect in this way. Quote, all my senses are wandering after the objects of the senses. My senses are wandering, but I am a pure soul, and therefore I'm beyond such things. One should accept the objects of the senses with such discrimination. So, the next section is titled The Renunciation of Karma And Gyan, the renunciation of karma and Gyan, leads to perfection in Bhakti Yoga. Well, what does that mean? Well, we'll learn. Although the instruction, namely to accept the objects of the senses with discrimination, that's the instruction, to accept the objects of the senses with discrimination, although this instruction seems more relevant to Gyan, right? The pathway of Gyan, because it's an intellectual, mental attempt. So although it seems more relevant to Gyan, it can also be favorable for Bhakti. The concluding verse of Bhagavad Gita instructs complete surrender. Right? That's Krishna's concluding verse. Sharanagati. Sarvadharman prityajya mamekam sharanam raja aham tvam sarva papebhyo moksha ishyami masujaha. So, the concluding verse of Bhagavad Gita instructs complete surrender, sharanagati, indicating that the processes of fruitive action, karma, and acquiring knowledge of the impersonal Brahma, Gyan, although they are to be completely given up, so this is indicating, this concluding verse is indicating that these two processes, fruitive action, karma, and impersonal Brahma, knowledge of impersonal Brahma, Gyan, are to be completely given up, and that all sense objects are to be accepted with the understanding that they are the mercy of Bhagavan. In this way, perfection in Bhakti Yoga is attained. So, he's saying here that this renunciation of karma and Gyan, it actually leads to perfection in Bhakti Yoga. It is also applied in Bhakti Yoga. And he says it seems more relevant to the pathway of Gyan, but actually it can also be favorable for Bhakti. Bhaktivinoda Thakur is pointing out that the concluding verse of the Bhagavad Gita instructs full sharanagati, full surrender. And that indicates, that instruction by Krishna to fully surrender indicates what? That the processes of karma and Gyan are to be completely given up, and that all sense objects are to be accepted with the understanding that they are the mercy of Bhagavan. So, Krishna didn't tell Arjuna to stop his action, did he? He told him act. He instructed him act, even though Arjuna had various jnanic arguments, actually. Arjuna did. But Krishna gave the entire Bhagavad Gita, and then at the very end he said, just surrender to me and give up all other dharmas. If you do this, if you surrender to me, giving up all other dharmas, I will fully protect you. I, personally, will fully protect you from what? Any kind of sinful reactions that may occur because you gave up all the other dharmas. Arjuna was very concerned about family dharma and social dharmas and all of these things. He didn't want to kill his relatives and his superiors and all of this. But that was not Krishna's plan. Krishna wanted that Arjuna would be victorious and the other armies would be destroyed, because that's one of the main purposes Krishna appeared on the earth planet, to establish dharma, right? Yada yada hi dharmasya glanir bhavati bharata. And in establishing the dharma, what would have to happen? The devotees would have to be protected and the demons would have to be annihilated. That's always essential to establish dharma, because that's the problem. When a dharma rises up, it's because of demoniac force. That's why a dharma rises up. It's always, every single case, it's always because of demoniac tendencies and demoniac natures of the conditioned souls. And then adharma starts to become more and more prominent and powerful. But it is always essential, that's why Krishna descends in his various incarnations, to establish dharma. When adharma has been rising up, then how does he do that? Paritranaya sadhunam vinashaya chatuskrita. I save my devotees and I annihilate the demons. And then dharma samstapanartaya sambhavami yuge yuge. I do this yuga after yuga after yuga, and I establish dharma. So Krishna, in his form of Vasudev Krishna, standing on the battlefield, is the expansion of his original Nandanandan Krishna for this purpose of establishing dharma. He spoke the Bhagavad Gita for the benefit of all the conditioned souls for the entire rest of the Kali Yuga. That this is the essence of all Vedic knowledge, and he summarized it in his last instruction. Sarvadharman parityajya mam ekam sharanam vraja. That's Bhakti Yoga. Bhakti Yoga is to fully surrender only to Krishna. Mam ekam. Only to me. Not to anyone else, anything else. You do what I am instructing. And then, aham tvam sarva papebhyo mokshishyami. I will deliver you from all sinful reactions. And he says, ma suchaha. Do not fear. Do not fear. So that's Krishna's instruction. If somebody is trying to follow Krishna's instruction of full surrender, but yet he's afraid, he's fearful, then he's not following Krishna's full instruction. I saw in a lecture, you can see it on YouTube, Prabhupada is very forcefully talking in Australia, that Krishna is telling, just surrender. And he's instructing, ma suchaha, do not fear. So you must fully surrender without fear. Full confidence. So that's what it means. One should accept the objects of the senses with this discrimination. What? That, everything is the mercy of the Lord. Everything is provided by him for his mercy. And then our senses can be properly controlled. So we'll continue with this tomorrow, completing this short essay. Each one of these essays are not very long, So we're going to study this. Bhaktivinoda Thakur is so kind that he has really given, everything that we need to know. How we can apply this Upadeshamrita in our lives in a practical way. Jai Shri Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur ki Jai. Jai Shri Upadeshamritam ki Jai. Shri Rupa Goswami Pada ki Jai. Shri Shri Rupanuga Guru Varga ki Jai. Sachinandan Gaura Hari ki Jai. Nitai Gaur Premanandi. Vansha Kalpatarubhascha Kripa Sindhi Vacha. Patitanam Bhavanebhyo Vaishnavyo. This is too low. You see this? It's gone too low, or this is it's not balancing properly.
Yeah.
Take aim. Melinda's here. There we go.
जय श्री श्री गुरु ग्रंथ कंदलित गिरि हरि श्री श्री राधा विनोद बिहारी जी की जय। श्री श्री राधा गोविंद जी की जय। Nitila Pravishta Om Vishnu Padastar Shri Srimad Bhaktivedanta Narayan Goswami Maharaj ki jai. Nitila Pravishta Om Vishnu Padastar Shri Srimad Bhaktivedanta Vaman Goswami Maharaj ki jai. Nitila Pravishta Om Vishnu Padastar Shri Srimad Bhaktivedanta Swami Maharaj ki jai. Nitila Pravishta Om Vishnu Padastar Shri Srimad Bhakti Pragyan Keshav Goswami Maharaj ki jai. Nitila Pravishta Om Vishnupad Asvatar Shata Shri Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Goswami Prabhupada ki jai. Nitila Pravishta Om Parma Bhagavat Pravar Shri Srila Bhaktishadas Babaji Maharaj ki jai. Nitila Pravishta Shri Srila Satchidananda Bhaktivinoda Thakur ki jai. Nitila Vaishnava Sarvabhauma Shri Jagannath Das Babaji Maharaj ki jai. Shri Gauri Vedanta Charya Shri Baladev Vijayabhushan Prabhu ki jai. Shri Vishnu Chakravarti Thakur ki jai. Shri Narottam Srinivas Shamananda Prabhu Chaya ki jai. Shri Rashas Kaviraj Goswami Prabhu ki jai. Shri Rup Sanatan Bhatta Raghunath Shri Jiva Gopal Bhatta Das Akshunasad Goswami Prabhu ki jai. Shri Sarup Damodar Rai Ramanandari Shri Gaur Parshada Vrinda ki jai. Namacharya Shri Haridas Thakur ki jai. Prem Skaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasari Gaur Bhaktavinda ki jai. Shri Antardreep Mayapur Samantandreep Gojumadreep Madhyadreep Koladreep Ritudreep Janadreep Moja Drumadreep Rudu Vipamaka Shri Navreep Dham ki jai. Shri Shri Radha Krishna Gopa Gopi Go Govardhan Dwadashavanatmaka Shri Braj Mandala ki jai. Shri Radha Kund Shamakund Gangari Munatasi Bhakti Devi ki jai. Shrimati Vrinda Devi ki jai. Shri Purnamasi Yogamaya ki jai. Shri Gopishwar Mahadev ki jai. Shri Jagannath Baladev Subhadra Shri Sudarshan Chakraju ki jai. Shri Ketra Mandal ki jai. Sarva Vigna Vinasikaya Shri Nithangade ki jai. Bhakta Prabhar Shri Kulad Maharaj ki jai. Charadam ki jai. Charya Sampradaya ki jai. Charya ki jai. Akarmat Raj Shri Chaitanya Mat ki jai. Shri Shri Keshav Ji Gaudiya Mat Saka Samuha ki jai. Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. Shri Harinam Sankirtan ki jai. Nanta Koti Vaishnavrinda ki jai. Samagata Bhakta Vrinda ki jai. Shri Gaur Premanandi.
Namaste Narasimhaya
Jai Srimati Tulsi Maharaj ki
Jai.
Om Vrindayi Tulsi Vai Priyai
Krishna Bhakti Devi Satyavachai Namo Namaha.
Namo Namo.
Tulasi Krishna Prayasi Namo Namo. Radha Krishna Nitya Seva Hare